Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Good morning. Well, maybe not morning. Depends where you are. I keep getting this wrong. Hello, everyone, regardless of your time zone. Great to be back on another episode of Shape the System. And today we're talking to Shannon-Vanstone, and we're going to be talking about a whole range of things. And so I'm trying not to pigeonhole what we're talking about. So I think before we jump into that, I just want to welcome you to the show and just introduce yourself a little bit about where you're at the moment, and then we can dive in.
Thank you, Vincent. It's great honor to be here with you today. And my name is Shannon-Vanstone, as you said, and I am a serial tech entrepreneur who wants to connect great people to do great things. And what I mean by that is I believe there's a lot of work for us to do, and there's more efficient ways to do it. And I am going to talk to you about some of those today.
Wonderful. Okay. And so to kind of get us in the zone here, I'm going to just start with profound impact and I guess where profound impact plays. And the way that I've been reading and understanding this is that there is a gap between what people are doing and an understanding and an ability to communicate that, which has a profound impact, ironically enough, on the ability for capital to reach the people who are doing amazing things. So I'm going to just put us in that zone. Have I understood that correctly, just in terms of where profound plays?
Well, profound does play in that arena. And if you don't mind, I can talk.
Sure.
I'll talk about a little bit about that and then where we're at today. And the genesis of profound impact was that we wanted to be able to not only articulate the impact of an individual in an organization, but we also wanted to visualize that impact in interesting and inspiring ways to encourage future collaboration and impact.
Right.
So that's how all the genesis of the company. It's led, as most startups do, we pivot a little bit. We take some of the basic premises, and our why is to connect great people to do great things. But we identified a specific area in the university and research sector where we believe our tools can engage and connect people to make the greatest impact. And in particular, there's $300 billion of research funding available every year globally.
Globally.
There are hundreds of thousands of researchers,
right?
Whether at universities or industries, corporate research departments that need that funding to conduct fundamental and breakthrough research. And so why do we care as a society? Because we need them to get the most research for the research buck. So what we're seeing now is inefficient use of this funding. So that leaves us, our society saying, wait a minute, this money is just being squandered.
Right.
So what if there was a way to effectively, efficiently match research funding opportunities with researchers and possibly even industry partner researchers too, to bring about the most advancements. So this is what we're doing. Now we're using AI and machine learning because there's certain things that a machine could do better than human beings. And taking an 80-page research funding document and reading through it is maybe not the most efficient and effective use of an individual's time, but a machine could do that. A human being's still involved in the process, but they don't have to be involved in every step of the way. So that's what we're doing now.
Okay, perfect. And I want to come back to profound impact specifically and how you are doing some of the things that you're doing. But I want to just firstly get us into the place of understanding a little bit more about this. I'm going to now call it the $300 billion problem or opportunity, if we want to phrase it that way. So just when we're talking about breakthrough innovation, and the one that comes to mind for me specifically is Wi-Fi, which I think came out of a research institute here in Australia, actually. I think CSIRO came up with Wi-Fi, and we absolutely take Wi-Fi, and I think GPS, probably another good example, completely for granted. But it's that type of approach to R&D that enables these types of things to exist, and then we just literally absorb them into our lives. So I want to understand, for these educational facilities or research facilities, public or private, like, how is it working today without Profound? Like, what are they measuring, and how does the process work to even try to get funding, or even say, here's what we did with your funding? Presumably those things are related.
We have made advancements in this area. Most tools are just search engines.
Right.
So if I'm a researcher in aging, and I could go onto websites and I can put in that and I could get a list. But there's no way for me to really know, am I eligible for these? Unless I dig into each one of these, right? Mm-hmm. So I may come up with 20 opportunities and I don't know which one is the best for me.
Yeah.
What we do is we take that and we do the matching and the fit, the perfect match and perfect fit in the background. And then instead of me having 20 or 50 opportunities, I may just have 2, but they are more tailored to me.
Yeah.
And so what researchers don't want to do is exactly this. They want to be doing research and we need them to do in research. And we don't want to waste time. We don't want to waste their time or the administrator's time at an educational institution. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing is taking a process that really needs to be automated.
Right.
And automating it and letting the human beings do the hard work.
Do the actual research, probably also with the help of AI.
Yes, research and then also just the application writing. Maybe they can use ChatGPT. Not saying they can or shouldn't, but what I'm saying is that matching is done better because we can look at the deadlines, the eligibility criteria, meaning the algorithms that we have.
Yep.
Not me, but the algorithms. And we can do a match that is more effective. It's faster. It's more timely. A lot of these applications and opportunities have deadlines that change. We can keep the individual up to date. So a machine can do this better than human beings.
Sure. And just coming back to it a step though, so you're talking about a discovery process here, but my understanding is that if you're in the process of R&D, whether you've got the grant yet or you now have the grant or you've got people who've been research assistants who are now out in the world, there's a whole bunch of data that represents the progress that you're making towards the thing. Let's take aging as the example that you're R&Ding on. And I'm trying to understand what an institution or even an individual within an institution is doing today to be able to produce evidence of what it is that they're doing and the impact of what it is that they're doing. Because this to me feels like the other part of that. A discovery problem is obviously a problem and a process problem. But the part where you say, why are we bothering to spend $14 million funding this aging research? What impact is it having? Let's dive into that bit for a moment.
Well, that's really what our genesis was. Profound Impact is trying to measure that impact.
Sure.
To say, okay, how do you do that? And that's in an organization, maybe even individually, impact is measured differently. So you have to first agree how we're going to measure it. What specific markers are you choosing? So that's a long process, right? So it can be, but I think individually you can say, if you're trying to cure cancer in your research or trying to find a cure for cancer with your research, you say, how effective is my research? You could maybe measure it, but sometimes it takes decades to really measure somebody's impact. So sometimes we have to chunk it up in smaller stages and look at it that way. We found that very difficult. It's very difficult to do. Mm-hmm. So we said, okay, maybe we can't just look at it by what's the end game, which may be even 100 years away in your research foundation. Maybe it's fundamental research because as it all builds up on each other, and before you could get to Wi-Fi, we needed this and that. Before you could get GPS, we had to have other things along the way. And historically, and it's just the way it is. But what if we could get down to the basic problem? Now, this is not the only problem, but one of the basic problems of research, and that's funding. Mm-hmm. And if we can find an efficient way of funding it, and we know that it's a good match, because what you don't want is a researcher who's looking for funding. It may not be a good match. She or she accepts the funding in an area or they're not really prepared to do the research or don't have time, but there's many issues. Maybe they're not the best. It's not the best fit for them. It's like dating the wrong person.
Right.
And you spend a lot of time just wasting time with them. And then you realize, and you throw them out like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You just throw it away. But we can't afford to continue to do that as a society. We have fundamental problems. And these problems are global and they're real and they're big, and we need collaboration and we need effective research. So what we started off saying, what trying to measure and impact, we said, let's take it down to one of the basic issues with this.
Discovery and matching.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know this too, and all the research that has been published, some is foundational and some is building on that, the foundation.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to measure impact. But I do want to tell you one way we have done it, which has been interesting. We work with a university called University of Waterloo. They are a leading university in Canada and worldwide in a co-op program. So a student comes in, they spend a year studying, and then they go out for 4 months and work. And then they come back. And then they do this for 4 or 5 work terms, and then they graduate. It takes a little longer, but they have all this experience. So the University of Waterloo has been, exists for 60, 70 years, not that old of a university. They still have they don't have a feedback loop.
Right.
They've never gone out to those individuals to understand how effective their program is. They may hear about a few superstars. So what we worked with them on is saying, okay, we'll go out to like the 2010 class, that math faculty graduates, and let's look at how they compare with people not in the program, but let's look how women, minority identifying individuals do versus the majority identifying individuals. And we can look at their career trajectory, and that is providing actionable insights. It's not their total impact, but it's like, how can I improve my programming to hopefully be in a better position to produce better impact?
Yep. Yeah, I understand. I want to dive into that in a little bit, but I do want to come back to something that you hinted at earlier around this idea of discovery and matching. And the thing that I'm curious about, because I don't have any understanding as to how the funding process for R&D works, and so hopefully I'm asking a stupid question that other people might also be thinking. I'm curious as to how we get into a position where the people who are out on the outside saying, hey, we're going to provide funding for X or Y in the agenda. Because it sounds to me like if someone said, hey, we're going to provide funding because you think Wi-Fi should exist, you need to know that Wi-Fi can exist to even create the problem statement. So how does that aspect of funding work? How is it driven from the outside? And then you've got researchers saying, I want that funding, for my curiosity.
Yeah. It could be in a bucket or specific topics such as AI. Now, I know that's a general, huge bucket. Then you get to machine learning. You could get to NLP and other really good acronyms. We've got a lot of acronyms going on. So you could do it by topic and just say, we're going to look at research in this general area. And that means it's broad.
Right.
And that means that then you can start drilling down. Maybe somebody has a great idea for how to teach a machine so it doesn't take over the world or whatever AI. But let's look at climate change and sustainability and maybe electric vehicle. I just spoke with one of the professors and researchers last week, and they have come up with a way to dissipate the heat that is generated by these electric batteries. Okay. So think about this. Yeah, let's give them funding because we know this is a problem, especially electric. So now you have to cool, and then that takes more of the battery life usage. So the whole thing is that once you say, okay, I want to fund in this general area, then it's interesting. Human beings, we figure it out. We go, we have a problem. Oh, we solved that problem. Oh, we have another problem. Oh, we're able to make these batteries that are linked to the Tesla, and it's on the skateboard of the car. But then there's this problem of the heat. And then how do we get rid of that? And how do we dissipate it quickly? when it's generating all this heat. So it's interesting that the more we build on it, say, okay, it's electric vehicle. We want to get to that. Now we've got this issue, that issue. And researchers, students, postdocs, professors, they continue to go, what problem are we trying to solve? What has been solved? That's what's wonderful, because we've learned how to solve problems by looking at what do we know? What what is it that we don't know?
Right.
And how are we going to get there? And we build on this because it's great. We have Wi-Fi. It's wonderful. We have GPS, but those were all built on fundamentals. And then people said, what if we could do this? What if we could? So it's that curiosity, and we continue to do that. So my algorithms are not going to help you with that, because that's the human being part of it. But that we have a bucket of funding, and then the funders usually give great broad scope for that purpose. Now, there might be specific funding that says, now we've identified this specific problem, like quantum computers.
Sure.
How do we get to be able to stabilize more qubits and have them working together?
Explain what that means, by the way.
Yeah. Well, those are bits. Instead of being 0 and 1, they can be in all states at the same time.
Right.
Anyway, but all I'm saying is that we get one place, and then a funding organization may say, I want you to specifically work on this issue of how these qubits are called, that are lined up, how they work together. Mm-hmm. And so the funding organizations are led by agendas.
Right.
And their agendas usually, is it private foundations like the Bill Gates Foundation or others like that? Or is it a federal government? Like Canadian government has specific mandates they want to push, whether it's an AI, climate, electric vehicles would fall under that, and sustainability or medical, med tech. So they decide they're going to have 2 or 3 pillars where they're going to put a lot of money into it.
Yep.
And they try to make that broad or specific, depending on where the people are in their research. I've been doing research for 30 years in information security, that maybe I'm looking at quantum computing information security. So then they could be very focused. But usually there's a broad funding in most federal and provincial and state governments. And then maybe the foundations would be more specific in their funding. Yeah. So I know that's a long answer to your question.
Well, no, I think it's important, because I think what right up front, we talk about this $300 billion opportunity, and it's a capital allocation problem, but you need to understand what the agenda that is being driven on one side for the problems that we're solving, right? If a researcher says, I really care about, I don't know, like my old man used to be very proud of this thing that he'd invented, which was a double-sided peg, which you could pick up from any side, because he just saw that as a problem. He wanted to be able to pick up a peg and not have to change it around to the other side to use it. And he thought an important thing to be solving, but ultimately someone else who has the gold makes the gold, the rules is the golden rule, I think is the term, he or she. So I think we do have an agenda challenge, which is what are people working on and what are those agendas driven by, and therefore researchers need to understand what's on offer, right? If you talk about the Bill Gates Foundation, he's made it very clear as an example that he is interested in renewable energy. He's interested in solving issues in the developing world around sanitation and access to medical, and he's also interested in longevity, as I understand it. Just curious about that discord, I guess, between kind of broad-based R&D that says we're not sure what it is, we just know it's sustainability based. If you've got a funding request related to that, here's the mechanism, versus someone who says let's solve qubits, or the exact example that you provided. Just in terms of the way that discovery and matching process would traditionally work, and then also how your technology plays in that, like how does that actually play out? Like how does profound impact actually get involved in the guts of that?
Well, that's a good question. I think that's the good thing about AI and machine learning. It learns from itself, and it knows what's good and what good matches are and what not good matches. A funding organization has their criteria and they lay it out. Let's say it is for general fundamental science, and there are some that just say, we're interested in funding this is not a technical term, wild and crazy idea. Okay. Yeah. And so they allow that latitude, saying, just come in with your interesting ideas. And I'm involved with an organization called the Perimeter Institute. It's a theoretical physics institute in Waterloo, Ontario. And it's fundamental research. It is not commercial. Most of it would not be able to be commercialized in our lifetime, or maybe in the next decade or 2 or 3 or 4. So it's not looking for quick wins. It's looking for deep wins. Mm-hmm. And so who can fund that? You have to look for a funding organization that understands that some research you need to really get down to and give it time. Whereas then there's other funding organizations are looking to take new ideas and how do we get commercialization of those ideas? How do we fund that? Because that's important too. So the good thing is that all these organizations exist, whether they're private or public. Some are looking at real problems that I want to solve today, and I want to do it in the next 10 years. I want to see results in the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. And in fact, my sister used to work with the Gates Foundation, and in an area that she was in was education, that the Gates at that time, and I don't know if this still is true, they backed off from because they weren't able to understand the impact. It was hard to measure the impact in specific areas where they were funding. So now they decided to fund in areas where they can see the impact, maybe in a shorter term, and real problems that they're solving. Where other organizations say, I really believe in extraterrestrial life, and I want to fund research and people who are looking at that and how do we move forward in that. So it really is good. So what we do is Profound Impact. We're able to take the framework, which in a funding organization works, and they're mandated what their guidelines and their eligibility requirements, and then match it to the individual researcher, our industry partner. And that means that there's funding for you, right? You might be wild and crazy idea, or I'm just trying to feed the homeless. I'm trying to address water scarcity. I'm trying to address these specific problems, maybe in a specific geographical area. Mm-hmm. There's funding for that.
And just trying to understand maybe a level down in terms of how the capability is working. And I think about, like, in the most simplistic version of someone who's trying to, and this isn't research funding, but early stage venture investing, a founder will go to a website and look at the bio and look at the things that they've funded before and look at the thing where they say we're seed stage and Series A, but we're always going to tell you too early anyway, but ignoring that. Look at all of that kind of, and then heuristically in their brain go, that feels like they might invest in my kind of stuff, and then go about it that way. My guess is here that this is going way beyond that. It's trying to get into the nuts and bolts of what research it is that you're doing and where it plays and what stage you're at, but looking heuristically even at documents you've already published or stuff that you can feed into it. And then on the other side, almost saying to the research funding foundations or organizations or governments, you need to give us a whole bunch more information, and maybe in a structured way, so that we can much better understand not just what you say, but what you're actually doing. Is that kind of what's going on here?
Perfect description of the overall problem. One, I would love if they could give it to a structured or format.
Of course,
that would be great, but that's not happening. So our algorithms have to get better and better. And this is a huge challenge. And I've spoken to many people who are experts in AI, and they're saying, this is really tough. Nah. And I said, we don't need to be perfect.
Better.
It's not like natural language processing where I'm chatting with the chatbot and I really want it to understand exactly what I'm saying because I need this specific response. We are trying to take 100 different opportunities for you, Vince, as a researcher, and narrow it down to 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for the best match given the information that we can ingest. Mm-hmm. And over time, our algorithms will get better and better. And those matches are going to be better and better. But it does not have to be 100% because I'm a human being. I can then say, oh, these 3 matches, this one is way off. I tell the machine, this is way off. You missed it. And the machine learned from that. The algorithms learn from it. Or this is just right. The machine algorithms learn from that too. Sure. So we don't have to be perfect in this. We just have to be better than an individual with a spreadsheet of funding opportunities and a spreadsheet of researchers, and they work at a university Office of Research or Office of Innovation, and they're doing this manually.
You're right.
So it's not to replace them either. We just want to make them more effective. And maybe over time, you don't have to hire that new staff. But this is what we're doing. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be better than the way it is today. But I do have to comment on one thing, because you mentioned VCs and their funding opportunities. We could use the same algorithm for this too. Yeah. And maybe even eliminate some of the bias that I mentioned. You had mentioned earlier to you that I feel that there is. It is real. There is real. I'm not saying we know how to change it, but what if we take the human being out of it? We can't completely, because the machines learn from the reactions from the previous. This was a good match or it wasn't a good match. But we can probably take some of the bias out. And with that, hopefully means that, as you said, they always say it's too early. You're too early. Come to me in 6 months when you have 10 more customers. Come to me. And as an individual who's raising money, which I am right now, we all, at the startup, we're always raising money. I say, tell me what I need to do specifically. How many customers exactly? And in what time frame? I'm trying to understand what they're asking. And then I want to understand why they're asking this of me. Anyway, that's my own process. But what if we could take out some of the unconscious bias in these systems and processes, even in funding researchers? I
wanted to try and, because we know this every time we get onto any social media or content site, that a lot of the algorithms, and this isn't to speak of AI generally, but do work on this idea of kind of reinforced learning models of, hey, this looks good. You just watch this one. Do you want 7 more clips on how to fix a door? No, I've fixed it. I don't need to see any more of them. And I'm curious too, in terms of how profound impact is, it's as much about what you're looking at as what you're not looking at, to actively try to remove some of these biases. And I think you touched on one earlier, and I want to dive into this, which is agenda bias, right? Everything we try to do in this show is about rolling up to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And one of those very specifically is around equality and equality of opportunity. And so I want to understand this in the context of both your algorithms, but just also in research funding generally. And we can use women specifically, but we could use more broadly just people, demographics that are underfunded relative to what the data tells us they should be purely on a merit base. Let's dive into all of that, because that's a lot, obviously.
Well, it is. And as we know, there's been a lot of criticism of specific machine learning, in that, where does it learn? What's the data it's learning on? And so it's just, as that old phrase, garbage in, garbage out. You have to be careful about what your algorithms learn from, what data they learn. And you have to continuously check, is this biased in some way in what we're feeding into the machine to learn? In particular, there was an example that, speaking of the Gates, Melinda Gates had, there was her resume and CV that was sent out, and they changed it from her to, they ran the algorithm first that was saying to predict what this person's going to become or be, right, or what they are today. And then they changed just the gender from she to he. She was a teacher and he was a lawyer. And there's nothing wrong with either of those professions. But the whole thing is that it's just that so the algorithm had some type of bias built into it. It learned from the materials that it learned. So that's a responsibility of the profound impact. What do we learn? Where's our data come? For you, because we're doing it specific to an individual, we learn from your previous data. But let's say you've been doing research in Bitcoin and now you want to do it in NFTs. Okay. So part of that is that we're going to be a mismatch because you don't really want to get grants in this one area, but this is all. So part of it is that you have to be current, and you have to have a vehicle. We pull all our data in. There's no input data, but people can input the data if they want. And so like I'm saying, I'm changing my focus to this.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
our algorithms are individual and not a collective group.
Mm.
So I'm finding research just for you, research funding opportunities just for you. So what data I'm taking is your data and learning from it. But collectively, we are also having our algorithms learn what's a good match and what's not a good match. But because we're dealing, I hope I'm making this clear, we're dealing on more of an individual versus a group of people. Let's say if I was trying to match female entrepreneurs in general to funding opportunities or even investors, then I have to be careful what data is. I always have to be careful what data that the machines learn from, but I have to be extra careful of what biases I may be introducing into the machine learning.
And I think part of the distinction potentially here is that, and I think about this from a lending context, which I've spent a fair bit of time doing. And a lot of the time when I look at kind of AI models for lending, they say, hey, we can help you approve loans faster by looking at all the loans that you approved. And that at a meta level is part of the problem, which is, well, you approved all these because of the way you used to do business. And so I think the distinction here in terms of where you're playing, but also how to remove some of these biases is not what you did, but what you would like to do. And give us enough metadata on what you would like to do, and we will match it well to people who would also like to do that. And that's where the basis is coming from, rather than how many people you did or didn't fund for the research in that area a year ago. Is that roughly where it's at?
Yeah. And this is the core of the problem that I mentioned to you before we started this conversation was you need to look at historical data. But as you said, we also need to look at models or even create models of where we want to be. And then feed that into the algorithms too. Because historically is if we keep doing, well, Einstein said it, right? What's the definition of insanity?
Continue to do the same thing over and over
Same thing
again.
over and over again and expect different results.
Right.
And so this is what we're doing even with VCs and funding. They go, this is the way, this is our model. This is our process. This is, I say it like this because I've got to be an older guy.
You actually have to be wearing a vest as well, I think. Like, there's a few other tropes I'm pretty sure we can throw in there.
So I won't use that
I'm
voice
sure
anymore.
Cooper Cafe in Palo Alto or whatever the other ones are.
Yeah. So this is, and they're doing it just based on historical data. This is, as you said, these are the loans I approved. These are the people I invested. These are the grants that I've given as a funding organization. And then guess what? We're going to get the same people and the lack of diversity, inclusiveness in this. If we keep doing the same processes over and over again and take it into, and then now we're feeding it into a machine that learns quicker than maybe a human being can. We also have to, as you said, we have to create the model of what does success look like, create those scenarios, and then feed that data also into the machine.
Yeah, I think, as you said right up front, this is a large, challenging problem to solve, and solving it is probably multi-decades. Part of me almost thinks, are you out looking for research funding? Because I feel like you probably need it to solve some of these challenges. Like it's not, I think it oversimplifies what you're doing to think of it purely as discovery and matching. That is the simplistic part of it, which is, hey, you want to do a grant for North America because you're solving a problem to do with water security in North America. Okay, well, we've removed all the non-North Americans. That feels like matching. But looking a level down into the heuristics of how they make decisions and what types of people they want in their programs and what timelines they even want to operate under, and trying to work out, probably through natural language processing models, actually what they're saying in the approval process or the grant process, and then matching that to someone's having previous ability. That feels like a multi-decade challenge. I'm curious as to how you arrived to be working on this problem. What's the personal arc of your story that got you here? Because I read your bio before coming on the call, and to say there's a lot on there is an absolute understatement, and I don't want to play all that back. But the arc of the story that got you here in this challenge, I think, is something I'd really love to understand.
So was a cryptologic mathematician with the U.S. government, and it laid a foundation for me to move into the information security area in the commercial world. So I left the U.S. government and went to Silicon Valley to a startup there. That's how I became head of Asia Pacific. So I went from a very technical to a business role. And why did I do it? Because I was an expert in the technology. So why can't now I set up the distribution channels and sell and be the salesperson and make it work? So I decided I wanted to go in sales. I wanted to bet on myself and play out because I understood that salespeople make a base and a commission. So I realized I can make doing this. Yeah, I did the math and it cha-ching, it works. So that led me into a career in information security. I came to Canada to a startup. We did all the security for BlackBerry. Now all of our algorithms are in every mobile device in the world. So that was great. And my late husband, Shannon-Vanstone, was the founder. He was a professor at University of Waterloo, a mathematician too. And after that, we started a company that we wanted to take the same technology and put it into the driverless car and the connected vehicle. So it needs security too, as a computer on wheels.
More security, I would suggest.
So yes, and we did that. And then he passed away and I continued to run the company. In 2017, I sold the company to Robert Bosch, a private German company that is 97% owned by a foundation that builds schools and hospitals around the world. So that's about the more of the social impact aspect. But I had a non-compete, a 5-year non-compete. So I really wasn't going to do anything because I was fine with where I was in my life. But there's an Oliver Wendell Holmes quote that says, every now and then, a man's mind is stretched by an idea or a sensation and is never, ever able to shrink back to its former dimension. So that means I'm a serial entrepreneur. I can't get away from it. It's there. My brain has been stretched. So I decided I wanted to do something else. And one is why I wanted to try to measure impact. And that's how we started this conversation, was I wanted to say, how do we not only measure it? How do we visualize? How do we inspire? How do we do future collaboration so it builds on itself? And so it started, and it was a project with one of the universities that was just going to be a project. And then I said, you know what?
Let's make it.
I'll start a new company. So I did. But after a while trying to do that, as I said earlier, I realized I found a problem that's going to help me long term to get there, to be able to do that. But this problem is one that is, I can articulate the problem. I can see if it's working. There's ROI, return on investment. I can make people more efficient with their time and their money. And so it's measurable. You can do it.
And I love that because I think there's two things that are at play here. And I'm guessing that having gone through the process of selling a company to an organization that was 97% owned by a foundation laid some fabric for you to think there's perhaps you came out of a research background and a technical background anyway, so I'm guessing you were close to that anyway, but bridging the gap and feeding both of your innate desires around both the desire to build something commercial, but also the desire to do important, valuable work. And I think what's really interesting about this story, which I think a lot of people who are in impact-led should absolutely really listen to, is this idea that you can be serving the larger ideal of what it is that you're trying to do by being very focused on a very immediate and pressing problem that happens as contributing to that larger thing right now. And I think there's a lot of founders, and I would count myself as one of these, who you just don't have the fortitude or even the self-awareness to say, you know what, this is actually a really important problem and ultimately it builds towards that thing. Let's solve that right now. And then that's in service of the greater thing. I wanted that particular moment where you had that kind of this awakening in regards to profound impact. Just help me understand just how that played out for you as well.
I wish I could say it was a moment of epiphany, but it was a process and it was a long term. I mentioned I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I've been with 5 or 6 tech companies. I've had 2 IPOs and 2 acquisitions. And so I know how to be successful, but I've also had some failures with that too. And here you are, you're plugging away on your vision and you think other people are buying into the vision, but the customers are not there. So I could continue trying to help them understand that they really needed what I was selling.
Sure.
Or I could listen to them. What is keeping you up at night? What is one of your biggest problems? And all this connection and measuring impact is important. But what will a customer pay for? And they have to have a large enough pain and see enough, see it, right now, and see almost an immediate gain in using your product. And my first product, Connection Impact, we still have customers using that product, but it's an engagement platform and measuring impact and inspiring future impact. What if I could address your problem right now that you're having and still, as you said, still get to what my vision is, is connecting great people to do great things. So if I could keep that in mind and yet develop a product that is helping solve a problem and people will pay for it. Yay!
It's in service of the greater vision.
It wasn't a short process, but I did come to realize that I had to put it is, as I said, I'm not veering from the path. I'm just making my goals, like my destination is a little closer.
Yeah. And look, I guess part of the reason I wanted to drill into it is perhaps this interaction and our dialogue can serve as an epiphany for someone else who might be missing the wood for the trees a bit on this, and do a bit of introspection, take a walk in the woods or whatever it is. I just have one last question, and it relates to very specifically where Profound is at today, our Profound Impact. I probably shouldn't shorten it. And just relating, if you're doing matching, and discovery, then you're essentially creating a two-sided marketplace. What's most critical for you guys right now? Is it better understanding the sources of money and funding so that you can better service the people who are already there, or is it finding the people who don't even realize Profound Impact exists and there's plenty of funding opportunities here? Which side are you trying to solve? What matters?
Yeah, I think the latter, because the one thing is that the funding, I do want to, before I finish that answer, I just want to say the funding organizations are also trying to understand their inherent biases.
Sure.
And their applications process and all that. But right now, our focus is let's get enough customers, get people using the product, getting hopefully effective matches. And then that feeds the algorithm to make better and better. The more data, the better the processes fine-tune themselves. There are universities, there's even industry partners out there who need funding. Maybe they're established companies, maybe they're startups, but they need funding to take maybe even from their core experimental research to commercialize it or to make it more applied. So it can be commercialized. So it's about that awareness, about the visibility. As I tell people, I have credibility. I need more visibility. And so it's that visibility with customers. And the more customers, the better and better our processes get.
Wonderful. Well, I hope that the show today can provide some level of leverage and visibility for you. I love what you're doing. And thank you so much for taking part in the show today, and all the best with it as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed our conversation.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.